My son-in-law left a voicemail on a Tuesday morning that I've saved to this day, not because it hurt me, but because it reminded me of exactly why I did what I did. His voice was calm, almost polite, which was somehow worse than if he'd been screaming. "Leonard," he said. "Not Dad, never Dad. We've been talking, and we think it's time you found your own place. Diane doesn't want to say it, but I will. You're in the way here. This is our home now." I listened to it twice, standing in the kitchen I'd built with my own hands 31 years ago. Then I set the phone down on the counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood exactly what I was dealing with. And I already knew what came next. Before I go any further, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what time it is where you are right now. I read everyone. My name is Leonard Graves. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 32 years working as a structural engineer in Asheville, North Carolina. I know how things are built. I know which load-bearing walls you can remove without bringing the whole structure down, and which ones you absolutely cannot. I know that a foundation looks solid right up until the moment it doesn't. I know these things professionally. I just forgot to apply them to my own family. My daughter Diane was always the sharp one. Graduated top of her class at NC State, got a good job in marketing, moved back to Asheville in her late 20s. She was independent, practical, a little stubborn. I was proud of all of it. When she brought home the man she was seeing, I did what fathers do. I shook his hand, I made conversation, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. His name was Curtis. 36 years old, vague employment history, very firm handshake, the kind of smile that was always slightly wider than the situation required. He sold something involving software. I never fully understood what, and I now suspect that was by design. He talked about it in broad strokes: scalable solutions, disrupting legacy pipelines. Language meant to sound impressive while communicating nothing. They married after 8 months. I helped pay for the wedding. My wife passed 3 years before that, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After she was gone, the house felt cavernous. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, nearly an acre of property in the foothills. I rattled around in it. My son lived in Denver, called on Sundays, visited at Christmas. We were close in the way that people who love each other can still be separated by geography and the ordinary busyness of life. When Diane and Curtis mentioned they were having trouble finding a place in their budget, the Asheville market had gotten expensive, really expensive, the kind of expensive that hits a specific income bracket hard. I offered them the spare bedroom, temporarily, a few months, just to get on their feet. That was 2.5 years ago. In the beginning, it was fine. Diane cooked sometimes. Curtis mowed the lawn once in a while. They were quiet in the evenings, mostly because they were both upstairs on their respective laptops. But I told myself that was just how younger couples operated. I was adjusting to having people in the house again. Adjusting to noise, to schedules, to someone else's preferences about the thermostat. Then things shifted in the way that things shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, just gradually enough that you keep telling yourself it isn't happening. Curtis started working from home full-time, which meant my dining room table was his office. My office, actually, technically. But I stopped using that word after he made a comment about how I was interrupting his flow when I came downstairs for breakfast at 7 in the morning, in my own house. He started taking calls in the living room, long calls, loud calls, and if I turned on the TV in the den, he'd come to the doorway and look at me with this expression that suggested I was being unreasonable. Diane backed him up every time. Not loudly, not confrontationally. She was too smart for that. She'd just say things like, "Dad, he's under a lot of pressure right now," or, "It's just temporary, you know that." The word temporary started to sound hollow around month 4. By month 8, Curtis had taken over the second bathroom entirely. His skincare products, and there were a lot of them, covered every available surface. When I mentioned this to Diane, she said he had sensitive skin. When I suggested he keep some of it in the upstairs bathroom, he said the lighting was better in the downstairs one. That was the end of that conversation. My workshop is in the garage. I restore old fishing lures, hand-carved wood plugs, mostly from the 1930s through 1950s, the kind that serious collectors pay real money for. I'd been doing it for 15 years since before my wife passed. It was my quiet, my focus, the smell of linseed oil and wood shavings, and the particular patience required for detailed work. Curtis started parking his car in the garage when it rained. Not the driveway, the garage. My workshop. He'd move my things without asking. Not carelessly, almost methodically, like he was just optimizing the space. I'd come in to find my sorting trays shifted, my tools rearranged. Once a box of finished lures I was shipping to a buyer in Ohio knocked to the floor. When I said something, he said he was just trying to make room. When I said the garage was my workspace, not a parking space, he looked at Diane. She looked at me. Dad, his car is 8 years old. If it gets hail damage, he can't afford to fix it. I should have said something then. Something clear. Something that established, without ambiguity, what was mine and what wasn't. Instead, I said I understood, and I went back inside. That's what I mean about foundations. You don't notice the small cracks until they've been accumulating long enough. The comment that finally made something shift in me didn't come from Curtis. It came from Diane. It was a Sunday afternoon, and a friend of mine from the engineering firm, a man I'd worked with for 20 years, had stopped by. We were sitting on the back porch, having coffee, talking about a fishing trip we were planning. Diane came out to get something from the porch storage bin and said, without really looking at us, "Dad, we're having people over tonight. You might want to make yourself scarce." My friend looked at me. I looked at my coffee. Make yourself scarce, in my house, to entertain their friends. I made an excuse, and my friend left. That evening, I sat in the garage with the lights low, working on a 1947 Creek Chub lure that needed a complete repaint, and I thought about a lot of things. About my wife, who would have had something to say about this situation long before it reached this point. About my son, who I hadn't told any of this to, because I didn't want him to worry. About the way a person can mistake patience for permission. A month after that Sunday, I called my attorney. Her name is Sandra Holloway. I'd worked with her on my wife's estate, and she's the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste time or words. I told her the situation. She asked a few sharp questions. Then she said, "Leonard, tell me about the deed, the utilities, the property taxes, everything," I told her. My name, sole and clear, on every document that mattered. "Good," she said. "Then you have options." We spent an hour going through them. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I needed to understand the mechanism before I started moving the pieces. That's the thing about engineering. You don't pick up a tool until you understand the load. I didn't say anything to Diane or Curtis. I went home, made dinner, watched the news, and listened to Curtis take a 40-minute call in the living room about something involving market penetration metrics. The next morning I was up at 5:30, had coffee on the back porch before they were awake, and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was standing on solid ground. 3 weeks later, Curtis left that voicemail. I don't know what triggered it exactly. I had mentioned, maybe 4 days earlier, that a woman I'd been seeing, I'd met her through the fishing club. Her name is June. She's a retired high school principal with a dry sense of humor and absolutely no patience for nonsense. Might be coming over for dinner that weekend. Just dinner. I'd told them out of courtesy. Curtis had gone quiet in a particular way when I said it. Diane had said, "That's kind of sudden, Dad." I'd pointed out that I'd known June for almost 7 months. She'd said, "It's just a lot with everything going on." I hadn't asked what everything was. 4 days later, the voicemail. "You're in the way here. This is our home now." I listened to it twice. Then I called Sandra. "Ready?" she asked. "Give me a week," I said. That week, I did several things carefully and in a specific order. I met with Sandra and reviewed the notice documentation. I contacted a property management company I'd worked with on and off over the years, told them I had a property that would need to be market-ready within 60 days. I opened a new personal account at a bank I hadn't used before and moved 3 months of my own living expenses into it. I identified a small furnished rental in the River Arts District. 1 bedroom, exposed brick, a parking spot included, 800 square feet, mine, with no history attached to it. I also called my son. He listened without interrupting, which is something he learned from his mother. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, how long has this been going on?" I told him. He said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I didn't have a good answer. He said, "What do you need?" I said I had it handled, but I wanted him to know. He said he was coming down the following month regardless. I told him I'd have a guest room by then. On a Thursday morning, 11 days after the voicemail, a courier arrived at the house at 10 a.m. I was not there. I was having breakfast with June at a diner near the river, phone on the table, volume off. The notice was simple and legal and unambiguous. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 4214, The occupants of the property were given 30 days to either enter into a formal lease agreement at fair market rent. I'd had the property appraised. Comparable rentals in the area were running $2,700 a month, or vacate the premises. The notice was signed by Sandra Holloway on my behalf. My phone started vibrating at 10:47, then again. By 11, I had 9 missed calls between the two of them. I moved my eggs around my plate and told June about the creek chub lure I'd been working on. She asked good questions about the finish process. We split the check. I answered on the 14th call. It was Diane. She was not calm. "What is this? Dad, what is this? You received the notice, $2,700? Are you serious right now? You're charging us rent? We're your family. You've been living in my house for 2.5 years, Diane. Utility bills, property taxes, groceries, all on my accounts. I haven't asked for a single dollar. But Curtis told me this is your home now, and I thought you should understand the terms of that arrangement," and Curtis was upset. He didn't mean it like that. He left a voicemail. I have the recording. He was very calm. Silence on the line. Then Curtis's voice from somewhere nearby. "Let me talk to him," Diane said. "He wants to." "I heard him," I said. "Put him on." Curtis came on with the particular tone of someone who believes he's the most reasonable person in any conversation. "Leonard, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't think so. You can't just— We've been here 2 years. We have rights. You have 30 days under North Carolina law, which Sandra Holloway will be happy to explain to you if you'd like her number." He went quiet. Then, "This is because of that woman. This is because you left a voicemail telling me I was in the way in my own home." That clarified things nicely. I ended the call. For the next 4 days, they tried a range of approaches. Diane called twice more, progressively softer each time, which told me she'd had time to think. Curtis sent a text message, civil, stiff, suggesting they could discuss a modified arrangement. I replied that any arrangements should go through Sandra's office. On the 5th day, Diane knocked on my workshop door while I was working. She sat down on the step stool without being invited, which was something she'd done since she was 11 years old. For a moment she looked like that 11-year-old, which made everything harder in the way that things involving your children are always harder. "Dad, I'm sorry." I kept my eyes on the lure in my hands. "For what, specifically? For letting it get to this point? For not saying anything when I should have? Which time?" She was quiet. "The breakfast thing," I said. "When your friend visited and I went for breakfast in the house my name is on. And your husband made me feel like I was inconveniencing him. I know. The garage. The bathroom. Being told to make myself scarce. I know." Her voice was smaller. "I didn't realize how much of it I was just going along with." I set the lure down. "I know you didn't. That's the part that I keep turning over." We talked for almost an hour. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't everything being fine. It was the beginning of something more honest than we'd been with each other in a long time, which was worth something, even if I wasn't sure yet what. At the end of it, she asked if there was any version where they stayed. I told her the truth. If Curtis wants to sit down with Sandra and sign a proper lease at market rate, I'll consider it, but it can't go back to what it was. She nodded. She didn't look surprised. Curtis did not want to sit down with Sandra. What Curtis wanted, it turned out, was to post about it. He had a LinkedIn presence, more followers than I would have expected. And, within a week of receiving the notice, he'd published a long piece about the challenges of multi-generational living and how some family members used legal mechanisms as a substitute for genuine communication. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. 3 of Diane's cousins texted her within 24 hours. Sandra, when I told her, laughed. "Is it a problem?" I asked. "For him? Potentially. Public statements about an ongoing housing dispute are discoverable, Leonard. If he makes factual claims that are inaccurate, there are remedies. But more practically, does it change anything legally for you?" "No." "Then let him write. You have the deed." I moved into the River Arts District apartment on a Saturday with the help of my son, who'd driven down from Denver for the weekend. We carried boxes, ate barbecue from a place 2 blocks away, and sat on my small balcony in the evening, watching the French Broad River catch the last of the light. "You seem different," he said. "How so?" "Like you're actually here." I thought about that. About the way I'd been moving through the last 2 years of my own life like a guest in someone else's house, which, functionally, is what I'd become. "I got comfortable being uncomfortable," I said. "It's a slow thing. You don't notice it." He stayed through Sunday. Before he left, he hugged me in the parking lot for a long moment, the way he hadn't done since his mother's funeral. I let it go on as long as he needed. The 30 days expired on a Wednesday. Sandra filed the summary ejectment the following morning. North Carolina's process is specific. The magistrate's hearing was scheduled 11 days out. I took the day off from nothing in particular and came prepared. Diane came to the hearing. Curtis did not. She sat on the respondent's side with a rented lawyer who looked tired and had 3 other files open on his tablet during the proceeding. I sat with Sandra, who had 1 file and had read it thoroughly. The magistrate was a methodical man with reading glasses on a lanyard. He went through the documents one at a time. Deed, utility accounts, tax records, notice of service, signed and certified, 30-day cure period with no payment or response. The attorney made an argument about equitable interest, about the length of occupancy, about the improvements Curtis had allegedly made to the property. I made a note to have that inspected later. Sandra responded with 2 years of utility bills, a property tax statement, and the voicemail transcript. This is our home now. The magistrate looked over his glasses at the attorney. Does your client have any documentation of financial contribution to the property? The attorney conferred briefly with Diane. No, Your Honor. Any written agreement establishing tenancy rights or ownership interest? No, Your Honor. Any evidence that the plaintiff consented to permanent occupancy? A pause. No, Your Honor. The ruling was what it was. Judgment for possession in favor of Leonard Graves. Writ of possession to issue if the property was not vacated within 10 days. In the parking lot afterward, Diane found me while Sandra was finishing paperwork inside. She looked exhausted. Not angry, just tired in a specific way. Are you going to sell it? She asked. I'd been thinking about that. The house was worth considerably more than I'd paid for it. The market in Asheville had done what the Asheville market does. I had no particular reason to hold it. I haven't decided yet, I said, which was true. She nodded. Then, Curtis is leaving. He told me last week. He found an apartment in Charlotte. I looked at her. Just him? Just him. I didn't say anything about that. It wasn't my place, and it wasn't the moment. Where will you go? I asked. Meredith has a place, she said. Meredith was her college roommate. She's got a spare room. Just until I figure things out. Okay. She started to turn away, then stopped. Dad, I'm sorry I let you become invisible in your own house. I don't have a better way to put it. That's a pretty accurate way to put it, I said. She almost smiled. Just barely. She was out of the house in 9 days. The writ was never needed. I drove over that Saturday with a notebook and walked through every room. Curtis had taken most of what was his, which was fine. There were some scuffs on the walls in what had been their bedroom. The downstairs bathroom would need professional cleaning. The garage was more organized than I'd left it, which I chose to interpret charitably. I stood in the kitchen for a while. The one I'd built 31 years ago, or had built, hired the crew, oversaw the project, chose the materials. My wife had picked the tile. I could still remember standing in that showroom with her on a Saturday morning, her holding 2 samples up to the light, asking me which one, and me saying whatever you want and meaning it completely. I called June from the driveway. How does it feel? She asked. Strange, I said. Good. Both. That sounds about right. We went to dinner that evening. Nothing special, a place near her house that had good trout. We talked about the fishing trip we'd been loosely planning, a week on the Nantahala. She'd never fly fished before. I told her it was easier than it looked, which was a lie, but a kind one. 3 weeks after the hearing, Sandra called to let me know that Curtis had filed a small claims complaint, alleging that I had wrongfully converted personal property of his that had been left in the garage during the move. The alleged property was a portable air compressor and 2 folding chairs. I had no memory of seeing either item. I told Sandra this. She said we'd respond accordingly. 2 weeks later, the complaint was withdrawn. I put the house on the market in late spring. It sold in 11 days. A couple from Atlanta, both physicians, who'd been looking in the Asheville market for 2 years. They paid $10,000 over asking. Cash offer, quick close. The night after we signed the papers, I sat on the balcony of my River Arts apartment with a glass of bourbon and thought about the number of ways a life can go sideways if you confuse love with indulgence and generosity with obligation. I thought about my wife, who had possessed an unerring sense of when to hold on and when to let go, and who had tried to teach it to me more than once. I was a slow learner. My daughter called in the fall, 2 months after she'd settled at Meredith's and started seeing a therapist and filed the divorce paperwork. She didn't call to ask for anything. She called to tell me she'd gotten a promotion and to ask if I wanted to have dinner sometime. We met at a Mexican place she liked in West Asheville. We talked for 3 hours, not about Curtis, not about the house, not about the last 2.5 years. We talked about her job, about my workshop, about the fishing trip I'd taken with June in September. We talked about her mother, which we hadn't done in a long time, and about small things we'd forgotten to tell each other over the years. At the end of the evening, in the parking lot, she said, "Dad, I want to be better at showing up for you. Not just when I need something." I said, "I know you do. Is that enough?" "It's a start," I said. "It's a good start." It was the truest thing I knew how to say. June and I are planning another trip for the spring. The Nantahala again, but longer this time, 10 days. She practiced casting in her backyard all winter, sent me videos of her progress. She's better than I was at 6 months, which I told her, and she said she had a good teacher, which I appreciated more than I expected to. My apartment is small and mine. My clocks. I have 11 of them now. Lures too. 6 finished since October. Line the shelf above the workbench I built along the spare room wall. The French Broad runs a 1/4 mile from here. In the mornings I make coffee and sit by the window and listen to nothing in particular. And the quiet sounds the way quiet is supposed to sound. I am not waiting for anything. I am not managing anything. I am not making myself small in any space that belongs to me. That's what I learned from all of it, finally, at 64 years old. That kindness without a boundary isn't generosity. It's just a slower way of disappearing. I stopped disappearing.